Academy event, The Age of AI, examining the impact of automation on the modern workforce, jobs and skills. Good morning, I'm Michael Heyman. I'm your organic automated assistant. Used to call it MC back in the good old days, but I think where we're going, it's going to be that kind of synthetics versus organics world that we are fast forwarding into at a pace of knots. So digitize this. That's the challenge of this morning. I think we've got a great morning ahead. 90 minutes of debate from people at the leading edge of this intersection between artificial intelligence and human beings. How do we keep people in the script of such a fast-changing world as we face at the moment? We've got innovators, we've got the Shadow Secretary of State from DCMS, Lucy Powell here as well. Panels, 90 minutes of great opportunity. So I was looking for some inspiration for this morning. And I looked at a few sort of improbable sources, and I'll share those with you. Well, actually, one probably not so improbable. Professor Stephen Hawking, one of the most intelligent people that's ever lived. Do you know what he had to say about AI? He said, the rise of powerful AI will be either the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. That is the intellectual version of sitting on the fence. Don't you think? It's going to either be the best or the worst. I mean, so you could draw from that what you will in terms of where it's at. You're going to kill yourself with that thing. Nobody know who said that? Apparently, in Henry Ford's memoirs, it was the most oft-quoted comment to him about the Model T Ford. That was 100 years ago. And of course, every turn of the wheel brings with it some amazing sort of changes in pace, some amazing changes in attitude. And of course, how we keep up with that change is a big part of the script. So much so, I'll move on to my choice for this morning, Daily Mail, which, as you can see, I've been doing deep research for the purposes of this morning. But it runs two side-by-side headlines. One is from the government's chief scientific advisor, Dame Angela McLean, who declares that she is an AI optimist. And the second story, this is no word of a lie that runs right by it, is AI told Windsor Castle intruders plan to kill the Queen was very wise. So this kind of like view about either how you feel about AI is it's the best of times or the worst of times, really does actually sort of, I suppose, in many ways, tinge how you are looking at the future right now, and actually whether we boldly go or timidly go into that future. So this morning is very much about whether you are, I think there are three things. I think there are techno-fantasists, those are the ones that just say, it's all going to be great. We're going to get to this moment of inflection, we're going to actually go forward and everything will be sorted. There are techno-fatalists, all celebrating the 32nd anniversary of Terminator 2 this month, where the red lights go on and not very good things happen. Arnold Schwarzenegger said in LA just 2 weeks ago, the predictions of Terminator 2 are happening. Well, it didn't end well in that one, as I remember. And then there are, of course, the techno-realists, in terms of people that just say, well, actually, we've been here before, we've seen well-hyped technology, and who knows where it is. So quick show of hands. Fantasists, people that are really excited about this. Let's say, there we go, they've had their shreddies. There's lots of you here. Realists and fatalists. Oh, well, there you go. It's realism versus optimism. There we go. That's a great way to be. And of course, how we sort of keep humanity at the script, at the heart of the script, is also, I suppose, about the power of fiction. It's great to be here at Local Globe, which is the VC and private equity house that has backed Citymapper, Love Film, Zoopla, and our host Academy this morning. So actually getting it right is a big part of what we're going to be debating this morning. So in these 90 minutes, we're going to hear about us. Not just the technology, but people, how we fare in the world of work, the world of the future. A world where even 5 years ago, the US Department for Labor was saying that 2/3 of primary school kids were going to go on to inherit jobs that have no current job description. Well, we now know that actually that probably is quite a slow-moving stat, because the world is being upended, recreated in front of our very eyes, which is very much pertinent to our first speaker, Ramrachia, who's the co-founder and CEO of Academy, which works with tech businesses to help them fill their vacancies with high potential people. He told Forbes magazine in a recent profile that you set criteria such as STEM qualifications or so many years experience, and as a result, you find yourself fishing in a very shallow pool. So how do we create that deep pond? Great pleasure to welcome Ash, who's going to give us an introduction to this, but I think he deserves the biggest round of applause.
Morning, everyone, or actually afternoon. We just ticked over to midday, and thanks, Michael, kind words. It's great to have you all today. Thanks, Saul, wherever you are, for hosting us. And I think we're in a brilliant venue for this discussion. I think the heart of the new square mile, as Saul calls it. And the reason we're here, obviously AI is the topic du jour everywhere. But what we want to talk about today is how does this relate to jobs, to skills, to the workforce? You know, on one hand, clearly, if you're optimistic, technology has been creating millions of high-paid, highly skilled, aspirational, impactful jobs of the future over the last couple of decades, and AI has potential to be a huge force multiplier, potentially creating prosperity and opportunity for all. On the other hand, you know, a lot of people say, is this a dystopian future we're walking into? A mass automation of labor, but for the first time, maybe moving into cognitive jobs, higher order jobs. What does this all mean? And what we want to explore today is kind of the relationship between policy, government, employers, the role of big business in thinking through some of these challenges. And I think you'll all agree the rate of change is just so rapid that no one can wrap their heads around exactly what this means. And that's exactly why we wanted to convene such a wide range of different stakeholders to have this discussion. And we've got some incredible speakers, panelists, DeepMind, faculty, Beamery, who are at the front of AI, and some of the major big corporate employers in the FTSE 100 here with us today. But why is this important to me and Academy? Who are we? Well, I set up Academy really to take on two big structural and pervasive challenges we have in the world of technology. One is, as you might know, for a long time, we've had this huge supply and demand imbalance, way more jobs of the future being created, which require skills to access. And so a lot of employers, you know, are struggling to fill their jobs. And these are roles that are extremely attractive, fulfilling, well-paid, and aspirational. It's difficult for people to get in to these jobs. And as a result, technology has an issue of representation. The sorts of people who get access to these jobs of the future often don't reflect our society, in particular gender and ethnic minority, and even socioeconomic representation in tech has always been pretty poor and lagging society, underperforming society. And we're interested to see whether AI is going to be a leveler. Could this reduce the barriers to entry? Could this create opportunity for all? Or is it going to take it in the same way it's been in the past? And the work we're doing at Academy is working with lots of our major employers here in the UK, companies like Ocado, International Airlines Group, Beamery, who are in the room, Aldermore Bank, who are in the room as well, to build new pipelines of more representative people getting access to these jobs of the future. And I think that's an incredibly important topic. If on one hand, we're going to get a restructuring of the workforce, how do we think about taking those people and transitioning them into the new set of jobs? So that's what we're doing at Academy. I'm delighted you're able to join us, and I'm excited to be able to introduce, to kick off this session, Lucy Powell. And Lucy is the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for DCMS, and I'll hand over to you, Lucy.
Thanks very much, all very trendy lecterns you have here in sort of trendy tech. It's not quite the lectern I'm used to, but anyway, we'll hopefully do well with. Thanks so much, Ash. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Saul, as well, for hosting us here at Local Global. It's a real privilege to be here. I did let the local MP know I was coming, Keir Starmer, for those of you who don't know, and he sends his best wishes and looking forward to doing other stuff with you going forward. I think I'm probably a tech optimist to answer your first question, but I think as a policymaker, as politicians, we do have to be mindful of all the pitfalls and everything else. So I'm really pleased to be here today. As I was introduced, I'm going to turn this around. Is that all right? Just go for that. Good to see so many friendly faces here as well. And one of my neighbours is here as well as lots of people I've worked with as well. So that was the hot ticket for this, that one of my neighbours wanted to come and be here as well today. But yeah, you don't need me to sort of tell you how quickly this whole agenda is emerging. And it's emerging very quickly in terms of government and Labour's response to these things as well. I'm currently the digital culture, media and sport, so we haven't reorganised yet as the government have done, and that's because we just wanted to take some time to think about what would be the structure that an incoming Labour government could consider. But it doesn't stop us from really pushing on these issues, which we have been doing. And so I think what I just wanted to say at the beginning was a bit of context around, obviously AI is emerging, it's very fast paced, very fast moving. It went from being something that we had a few think tank sort of workshops on a year or two ago to being in the news every single day at the moment. It has the power to be transformational for our public services, transformational for our economy, transformational for the way in which people do work and achieve value in their lives. And I think when you put that alongside quantum computing and semiconductors, all the other sort of issues that are around, but particularly alongside quantum computing, I think the scale of the processing power and the scale of change is going to be very profound. And we've talked about the opportunity of AI, particularly in our public services, something that Keir's talked about recently, for example, in health tech and diagnostics, the processing power there, saving radiologists, finding cancer cases, saving them 60% of their time, for an example. And we've got John Ashworth, our shadow DWP minister, talking today about using AI more effectively in job centres to help people write their CVs and get their jobs, although we know that could come with pitfalls as well in terms of discrimination and prejudice. And looking at data issues too, which is obviously really important in this context. If you take an example of Greater Manchester, where they've pooled together the data of all of those under the age of 5, it's enabled them to really deliver early intervention in the early years much more effectively, and it's driving up that development age of children under the age of 5. So there is real potential here, but there is also, as you're discussing today, what comes with that is huge disruption potentially, especially in the nature of work and the economy. And I think the big question for us as Labour politicians and as policy makers is who benefits from this big disruption, in whose interests does this disruption work? Will it be for those who already hold the wealth and power and the data sources and the platforms, or the big tech community, so to speak? Or will it leave behind communities that have previously been left behind from previous tech disruptions, like the deindustrialization or the industrial revolution in the past? Or can we harness this technology for public good and in the interests of the many, and make sure that the benefits are fairly shared across the country, across community and across workers? And I think we feel that we got some of this wrong when it came to looking at social media. We've acted too slowly as a country in terms of regulating that. We've allowed some of the platforms and technologies to race ahead, and we're lagging behind. And this has had really difficult consequences for the mental health of young people, for dis and misinformation proliferation, for misogyny, hatred online, and all of those challenges that you'll all be familiar with, which Molly Russell's parents described as monetizing misery. So we do need to learn the lessons of that. And I think it's great that the Prime Minister wants to take a global leadership position on these issues. But what I would say is that you can't just talk big, you need to act big as well, and not just act small. And I think the Online Safety Bill has been an example about how not to do digital regulation well. It's been delayed, we've flip-flopped, there's been indecision, it's been watered down at the last minute, and it's taken 5 years to come about. It's on its last day in the Lords today, for those of you who are interested. The data bill, which the government have brought forward, doesn't even mention AI, and it's sort of weakening rights just at a time when we need to give people confidence in their data and how it's been used. And the AI strategy, although there were some good parts to it, has been sort of out of date before it's even the ink is dry. Can you think of a better digital analogy to the ink being dry? Please let me know, because I could do with one. So I think we want to see a different approach, and I think that's why we feel that this is a moment that does call for Labour values. I'm not here to sort of be that party political, but obviously it is about applying those values to context, and I think that's what your conference is really discussing for good, to direct AI for the public good and in the interests of the many. And I think it means getting ahead of that coming storm, working with business, ensuring that workers feel they've got confidence in the changing nature of their industries around them. And we'll work in partnership. That's why we're really keen to be at these sorts of events today and use the UK's strengths to develop some of that competitive advantage that we have. So we want to take a values-driven, principled-based approach to regulation of AI, embedding fairness, accountability, safety by design into the foundations of how the technology works and impacts on society. And our aim will be that everybody everywhere gets to benefit from that technology, whether you're a software engineer here in London or a nurse in Manchester or a creative in the Outer Hebrides. We need to lay those strong foundations to make sure that is the case, not just through regulation, but making sure we've got a really clear skills agenda, which I'll come on to, connectivity, the active industrial strategy and a plan for job creation, and a modern government that's really able to seize these opportunities as well. And I think that outside of the big trading blocs, outside now the EU and the US, we have an opportunity to forge a different path and to show that leadership in some of these areas, as long as we have a clear long-term strategy and we have this principled based approach, which we'll be developing hopefully with you over coming months as well. So just in terms of your main for today, in terms of that impact on workers, I think this is a really good illustration of around the approach that we would take, and one that we are particularly concerned with, because I think workers can either be empowered by technology, or they can find themselves on the wrong side of biased algorithms and robot firing, as it's become known. So we want to ensure that workers benefit from new technologies in their workplaces, but that employers are accountable for that use, and that technologies are designed with worker safety in mind, whether that's surveillance, performance management, hiring and firing, and so on. And as the technologies change, an active government working in partnership, an interventionist active government would develop that over time with with our clear industrial strategy, which we've been laying out as well. And to realise this, we do need to get the foundations right, as I was saying, through skills, responsible regulation, connectivity, and so on, and making sure that everybody can utilise this. Because every job is going to become digital. Every business, every job, if it's not already, will become digital. And one of the key issues we've got as an economy is our long tail of poor productivity. So we've got a great tech sector, which you all exemplify here in this room and here in this building. We've got world-leading tech sector, but we have this long tail of poor diffusion of technology and adoption through our economy. So it's only by reskilling and retraining, by having these clear foundations, that we can really, I think, drive up productivity and that long tail issue, which is so important to what we're trying to do. And that's why we're working on a digital economy green paper, which hopefully will be being launched in the coming weeks, something that Keir is leading on. He's doing a speech a little bit about this in the coming weeks around how the digital technology disruption that we're going to see will also help Labour deliver its missions in government as well. So just a bit on skills. You all know better than me about the huge growing skills gap that we have even in tech and beyond tech as well. And it's not just about looking for more software engineers, although I know that is a key issue, or mathematicians or data analysts, but also about ensuring that you've got people with the creative skills and the marketing, design, and other digital literacy and creative skills at the moment. And as I think you alluded to at the beginning, our school system at the moment is really not producing enough young people with those skills of the future. And that's why last week at our big education mission, I don't expect you to have followed that closely, but one of the key planks of the next Labour government, Keir Starmer was setting out last week, is that we will now require schools to do more when it comes to teaching GCSEs, children taking GCSEs in the creative subjects, arts, drama, music and so on. And also we're going to be looking at reforming that digital skills agenda. I have a particular bugbear about the computer science GCSE, which I'm sure we'll share. But it's also why we are promising to reform the apprenticeship levy as well, because there is that disconnect between what you need as employers and what's coming through the pipeline, and the rigidity of the apprenticeship levy is holding many businesses back, especially startup businesses, small creative digital businesses, able to really seize the opportunity of apprenticeship. So we're going to half the apprenticeship levy can be used more flexibly. We're calling it a growth and skills levy, and we're working with businesses like yourselves to ensure that really happens when we're in government. So hopefully the reform of the school system, reform of the apprenticeship levy will help unlock some of that talent pipeline for your sector. But of course, the next big issue, which you alluded to there at the beginning, Michael, is the workforce of today, because actually most of those jobs of the future that we don't know the name of yet, please let me know some of the jobs of the future, will be done by today's workforce, not by the future workforce. So I'm really pleased to be here. That gives you a quick canter through of some of the things that we're thinking about, and we really look forward to working with you. Amy, my political advisor, who's at the back there, who's brilliant on these issues, she wants to stay for the whole day to really immerse herself in a lot of your conversations. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the whole session, but I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Cheers. That's great. Thank you very much, Lucy. Brilliant to hear from you. Actually, I think a really good challenge to those that are thinking about AI for the public good and in the interest of the many feels like, you know, the sort of the first line of the code, doesn't it? In terms of actually, well, what should AI be there to deliver? And of course, thinking about the jobs of the future and letting us all know about them is the job of this next panel. It's called the Jobocalypse, which is probably, you know, something we're going to challenge, I hope. How do we future-proof the job market? We're going to be joined for this by Lou Cordwell, who is Lou Cordwell OBE, who's the Director of ID Manchester, Chief Creative Officer for Magnetic and Chair of the Greater Manchester LEP. We're welcoming back Ash as well, from CEO of Academy, Anna Thomas, who's from the Institute for the Future of Work, and Tom Nixon, who is the Head of Government Practice at the Faculty of AI. Do give them a big round of applause. Come and take a seat, guys. Pardon? Do you not know your order? I think you're here, Lou. Ash is there.
I think I'm at the end.
Anna, you're there. It's like an algorithm, isn't it? There you go. So, that's beautifully done. You see, we're not redundant yet, are we? Right. Well, I just think that's a really good challenge. What are the jobs of the future? Because actually, we've got a senior politician listening. Lou, what do you sort of make of this whole debate? Are you excited about it? What do you think is going to pop up the other side? What are we talking about in a year's time, do you think, or even longer?
Longer is probably the biggest challenge, isn't it? I think, yeah, I am optimistic. I mean, you know, I got into tech 25 years ago because of my passion for its power to democratize. I think we've kind of slightly lost our way a little bit in the meritocracy along the way. And I think hopefully the publicity and the debate that we're now getting on the back of AI begins to focus some of that conversation around what constitutes fairness and equal opportunity. And I think Lucy's absolutely right. Skills is at the centre of that conversation, how we enable those pathways. I think the honest answer is nobody actually knows what the jobs are going to be in 5 to 10 years. And what we've certainly learned in a Manchester context is, therefore, you need the agility, which is often not a word associated with education and the skills system in this country. So I think what we've learned is there's a kind of more entrepreneurial approach that's obviously championed by people like Ash, but there's also a kind of policy approach that means that you have to begin to localise the control of those skill systems so that you can flex and be more agile in line with whatever those employer needs are going to be. But what we know is we can't write a skills roadmap now for 10 years and it play out beautifully and meet all the needs of employers. So.
Now, I'm going to give each of the panellists a chance in a minute to tell us a little bit about their own day job, but I just think picking up, Anna, on Lucy's thoughts there about preparing for this unknowable future, and actually hearing Lucy, actually because we don't know, we've got this great anxiety. I mean, how does anxiety become confidence when you look at the future of work? Because that ultimately is what seemed to be once upon a time a job that only would be for a very few, working in tech, working in software, suddenly becomes socialized and becomes much more acceptable. Are there points of psychological change that we have to go through as a society to get ready for this change, do you think?
There are points of all sorts of change, including psychological. I think perhaps it's helpful to start with what we know, and perhaps in answering your question and starting the conversation, I can share some results from a survey we've done with Warwick Business School about how AI and autumn technologies are being used, and what the predictions are of CTOs in firms across the country, done by Professor James Hayton, I should say, as part of the Pissarides review. So 80% of the firms surveyed said that they had introduced AI or automation technologies for both cognitive and manual tasks, and they. And also a very high number, nearly 80%, 79%, said that it wasn't just job creation. There would be job creation, and just over 50% job loss too. So we're talking about a huge range of changes to not just the number of jobs, but the nature of jobs, the condition of jobs, the quality of work, right across sectors.
And Tom, you're looking at the kind of, I suppose, the safe deployment, you're looking deeply at the technology itself. How are you feeling in terms of what you're looking at, in terms of how confident as consumers, as workers, how confident as people should we be about the deployment of AI?
So I think reasonably confident. I think if we look at so what we're doing at the moment, we essentially are deploying AI systems for public sector, private sector, big, small organizations, particularly over the last 6-9 months with the rise of generative AI, essentially deploying the tech underpinning ChatGPT, that type of tech, into different workflows, into different, solving different problems. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is there's in terms of the ways you can do that safely, there's a whole bunch of tech that can and needs to be built to essentially almost general purpose tech that can sit around the general purpose models themselves to make that deployment safe. So I can unpack that if helpful, but I think, yes, confident on that. In terms of what that will mean for jobs and the nature of jobs, I think we're really only scratching the surface of that. So I think essentially what we're seeing at faculty, we're seeing the big, large organisation, including people represented in the room, each making market-facing, very large announcements on investments in AI, job reductions. This is corporate strategy. If they're not doing that, they're getting a hammering in the markets, etc. But there's that's going on, the big forward look. But then in terms of right now, it's the really at the early stages experimentation, foothills. Let's try building something, but not even really yet thinking through, well, what does that mean for overall workflows? What does it mean for jobs? What does it mean for how our current teams are going to have to evolve how they work to be more productive, etc. I think that is just getting going.
Now, Anna, I can sense you want to go. I'm just going to give Ash his opening remark, then I'll come straight to you. But I suppose thinking about what we've just heard is we're at this kind of moment where it feels like the wheels are turning. We may well look back on a kind of, this was an age of change, which might be akin to the Edwardians becoming a modern society. And I suppose how we prepare ourselves as workers of today for the economy of tomorrow, Ash? I mean, that strikes me as the driving question at the heart of all of these responses. Give us an academy point of view and says, well, how do you do that? What are the tips? What's the advice you'd give us?
Yeah, profound question. I mean, firstly, I want to say I'm incredibly excited by the potential of AI to be a leveler, to be a source of opportunity for everyone in society. If I think back to kind of my own career, if you like, you know, I was brought up in a pretty underprivileged area of inner city London, you know, on sort of free school meals and not really any potential role models. So the idea that you could go to Oxbridge, I didn't, and get a professional job in one of the sort of big magic circle or sort of consulting, banking, whatever the prestigious jobs were, that felt to be totally inaccessible. And through a bit of a quirk of fate, I ended up working in this industry called technology, up in Manchester for a company called the Hut Group, joining as a 23-year-old with not many skills and just some ambition. And because that was a kind of rocket ship experience, a startup that went to a multi-billion company from 50 people to 5,000, it was the most extraordinary journey of social mobility for me personally, created a lot of opportunity. And then we saw that it actually had the potential to create opportunity for our local community in Manchester, which again was an underprivileged area. And we were able to find, screen, identify, predict who could be successful in this new world and convert them into some of the skills we needed as an employer. And that created an incredible opportunity for literally thousands of young people who, just like me, would never have dreamt of being, you know, a traditional professional in that way. And I'm hoping that AI is going to do that at 10x the scale.
10x the scale, Anna. I mean, I think this is something, if you're optimistic about this change, well, you say, well, actually, AI is going to pull the edifice down. It's going to create this playing field where so many of the wrongs of the past can be put right by the future. Is that just naive, do you think? Or actually, are we at this point of change where this future society that we're rushing towards is suddenly showing signs of being created?
Well, like Lucy, as Lucy said, as well as you, Ash, there's huge potential and advantage. You can see that in the workplace. You know, advantages to make things more efficient, more accurate, to correct things about our past behaviours that we weren't even aware of before, if we were at the intervention points. But it really needs to be. We really need the conditions in place, the enabling conditions in place at different levels, at individual level, firm level, and at sort of and at infrastructure, regional and national level. So looping back there because I haven't got to the exciting bit.
Oh, sorry, I haven't read. Go on, give us a headline. Go. That's
the headline. Although research and analysis is ongoing, there's a pretty clear link between regional innovate at a regional level between regional innovation readiness, so including things like infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and investment in education and capital, and good work outcomes. And at a firm level, there's also emerging, increasingly strong evidence that human resource practices and job design that deliberately augments human capabilities, and that includes things like higher levels of information and consultation, is linked with better outcomes in terms of both job quality but also job creation. So that's so it has to be done, in a values-driven way, but in a very deliberate way, a way that's conscious of human design decisions and choices right the way through the tech cycle.
Lou, we hear that saying often in this debate that, attitude is the small thing that makes the big difference. I mean, Manchester is a story where we know about that attitude, the Manchester magic, the changes. And actually, you see it today, but you saw it in the past in terms of things like the Industrial Revolution, home of that. How do cities take their place as the home of AI? When you hear about national strategies to be the global hub of AI, how does a city get its part of the action?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you're talking in a kind of place-based way there, and we're seeing that now in some of the productivity data. Greater Manchester's outperforming most European cities now from a productivity and a kind of economic success perspective. Actually, we would attribute that to exactly what you're describing, which is values-led behaviour. So it's really interesting now that kind of what was considered a softer connectivity between being very values driven as a place and the hardwiring now that we're seeing in terms of infrastructure investment, particularly around the innovation agenda, which we believe for us is a huge part of the reinvention, if you like, of the role of cities in a post-pandemic economy. And cities have changed what their role is forevermore. If you stood in Manchester city centre 150 years ago, you'd have seen a dramatically different set of industries and experiences than you see now. So that flux.
But they
is
were
constant.
super industries of their time.
But
right?
they were design and the technology industries of our day. We have a school of art because we needed patterns to put on the technology of the day, which was fabric and creating fabric and the looms. And so I think for us that's hardwired into who we are. But I think for lots of regional cities, the innovation agenda that we see, regardless of who's in government, there's going to be a focus on science and technology. The focus on physical place and what's required to drive that innovation agenda, I think, is how we're going to start to see that play out, and a reinvention of what the role of physically meeting and physically convening and creating those interconnectivities.
Ash, just pick that up for a second. I'm going to come to you, Tom, as well, because I want to pick up on the policy. But on this thing about how we get ready for it, I interviewed Anthony Selden, and he said, why haven't we got schools of AI? Why haven't we got, where's all the stuff that happened before? Now, if we want to be true leaders at it, what would be on your sort of checklist of things we could get going with to actually step more confidently into the future, do you think?
It's difficult for the education system to prepare people for jobs of today, let alone the jobs of tomorrow, because the change is so fast. The context we had up north and the context we work in academies, we were creating about 1,000 jobs a year in the north that was skilled jobs, engineering, data science, management, and everything in between. And we just couldn't buy the people with the ready-made skills or talent. And there seemed to be no short-term solution for this issue. You could lobby government and say, hey, we need more visas to sponsor people with the skills from outside the country. Or you could complain about the curriculum that's being taught in schools. But we needed a solution here and now. And what we decided to do, and this is what we do now in Academy, is we felt as a major employer, it was incumbent on us to step up and sort out the issues of skill shortages ourselves. And we did that by converting some of our best practitioners, our technologists, and we made them full-time teachers and started to design our own programs, our own curriculums. And we were able then, because we had that capacity, to open opportunity for such a vast array of different people who normally wouldn't even get a look in because they don't have the credentials or the experience. And so I think if we're going to prepare ourselves for what potentially could be the biggest and fastest reallocation of talent that we've seen, this thing is probably way bigger, way deeper, way faster than we imagine. I think you're going to need to see industry, business, employers step up and actively participate in the skill system.
Tom, I'm mindful of that saying that the most feared words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But how does government help AI? How does government actually create that responsible, equitable, fair environment from a policy perspective?
I think this is really hard, and I think what the Shadow Secretary of State was saying, I think resonated. For me, in terms of I used to work in government, I used to be head of strategy in DFE, so thinking quite a lot about this sort of skills education system implications. If I look at the sort of labour market impact, I think lots of reasons to be optimistic about overall labour productivity, overall UK productivity, which is fantastic. It's important for prosperity. For job creation, yes, and for job quality, I think as well. Actually AI can essentially automate a lot of the stuff that we all find annoying, frustrating about our jobs, leaving us kind of the fun bits. So all those things, great big tick. I think the thing I am nervous about is the sort of equity inequality aspects. So I think we're already seeing big investments aimed at job reduction in sort of classic non-tech industries. Big reductions in customer service job numbers, all that sort of stuff. It's not apparent to me necessarily that we're going to see the same big job creation in the sort of industries of tomorrow. Yes, of course there will be some, but almost the whole point of the billions of venture investment going into those sort of new industries, new sectors at the moment, is that it can be more productive. It can mean fewer jobs. So I think there is an equality, and we have to take very, very seriously.
Well, Anna, maybe you could pick up on the inequality point. I'm just looking here at a survey. 81% of graduates across computer sciences, engineering, technology from UK universities are men. I mean, there's a major rewiring that needs to happen, isn't there? I mean, how do we actually take the necessary steps as a society to get this right?
Well, it will need policy interventions right the way across the spectrum and across departments, but sticking perhaps with regulation, where we've started in the first instance, it will include regulation. So, you know, the UK has huge strengths, as we all know, in sort of innovation and research, but it also has strengths in law and governance. And so it's sort of time to perhaps to pull those together, and to lead, I think, in responsible AI, as the Prime Minister says, as the Prime Minister wants to. We will need to think about how we can develop and sort of activate the fantastic principles that we've got in the UK and translate those into a framework of regulation in which sort of the goals are set. The goals are set. There are certain red lines, and there's a move, you know, in line with a preemptive shift nationally and internationally towards early evaluation of risks and impacts. And then the detail can be worked up absolutely by on a sector basis or a regulator basis and with domain-specific detail.
But Ash, this whole thing about responsible AI is also about a responsible attitude to people. I mean, without wanting to give you an advertising break to talk about the work of Academy, we've got to think differently, haven't we, in this world? I mean, you kind of raised it a little bit in your intro, right? Which is actually, it makes different opportunities come together more quickly. But actually, in a world that still hasn't got there, how do you bring that world with you to start looking at it differently?
Well, I think it was your stat, 21% of STEM graduates being male, is an interesting case in point in which, for one reason or another, you know, socially or culturally, women, and it's the same story for sort of those from minority ethnic backgrounds and so on, opt out of STEM. We've shown through our work that it's totally possible.
Why is that? In terms of, opt out of STEM? What's the blockage we've got to get over?
Oh God, that's a kind of across many dimensions. But I mean, women would you know, when we speak to women, they say, well, that's not for me, or I won't be as good as, or you know, why would I want to do that? So there's a lot of social and cultural conditioning, if you like. What we've been able to show and replicate across maybe 50 different organizations is that it is possible to find people who, had they made different decisions, would be outstanding in the STEM pool, but they opted out. And it's possible to find people and reconvert them back into STEM jobs in technology. And you can quite accurately predict who's going to be successful. And we've been able to do this on many levels by converting people who maybe decided to study humanities or social sciences. But on the other end of the spectrum, people who started a career in, say, things like customer services or delivery driving, and still have outstanding aptitude and potential. And we've been able to convert those people in. So I think, you know, that's bringing alignment between the sort of skills and employers much closer than the current education system.
But do you think, I mean, just because I want to move on to industries, actually, but do you think that what we know now might be seen as a kind of form of antique in a very short period of time? I mean, how substantial a change should we be ready for in terms of our skills, in terms of our attitudes, in terms of everything that we take granted today might be very different because of AI tomorrow?
I think so, and I think the traditional markers, of skills or of talent, of who represents a quality worker, is kind of eroding before our eyes. I don't think degrees are potentially the same signal to employers. Certainly the education itself, what people are learning, is increasingly divorced from the reality of the jobs. So, and I think you're going to see, because of the rising levels of debt and the expense of doing some of this further education, you're going to see a mass shift in attitude and behavior from our next generation. So all of these things are colliding at the same time. And I think if you're an employer, how you figure out who's relevant, both inside your current workforce and from outside, it's moving so fast. So I think, yeah, the system is being reshaped very radically, very quickly.
Lucy said, every worker is a digital worker, I think she said in her speech. Will every worker have to be an AI worker? I mean, what are the industries that you think, oh, we're going to see the changes quickest? I mean, your creative industry background, but where do you see it? What should we be ready for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for a long time, we've just thought of tech as a horizontal across all sectors. So pretty much everything at a national and a local level that we want to be successful in is going to have to be tech-enabled. You substitute a component part of that for AI, because increasingly a lot, well, it already is, and perhaps people don't realise it. To some of your statistics before, it's just we've got a particular media spotlight on AI as a contentious issue at the moment. So I think, that kind of level of comfort with digital skills, both for all workers, but then having a pipeline that, as we've seen in our economy, can flow from between those different sectors quite comfortably, and that's going to be our massive challenge.
We're down to our last couple of minutes. What happens next, Tom?
I think we're going to see in the next 5 years, I think we are going to start to see that big acceleration in displacement. So job displacement, job creation. If I look at AI, we've been building AI systems with sort of narrow AI for about the last 6 years. It's sort of, that is in some ways quite inefficient, whereas I think what is the big change that we're seeing now is the sort of general purpose nature. It's just totally reduces the barriers to sort of entry or use for organizations. We're going to see that big acceleration in the next 5 years.
Anna?
We're going to see that, but we're also going to see transformation of work in other ways, which includes augmentation, creation, intensification, telepresence, matching these features of the labour market, which we need to focus on more. The conversation perhaps together makes me think that we need to stop and think now about how we recognise, develop and reward human skills, and perhaps think about, Liz, hearing what you're saying, reframing the whole skills debate, from something that's done to people according to predetermined needs, to working with people to augment their best capabilities.
Ash, Elon Musk answered that very same question by saying, I think we might exceed a 1-on-1 ratio of humanoid robots to humans very soon.
I'm not qualified to sort of speak.
Disagree with the great Elon.
speak to that, but no, I mean, I'm optimistic. With the right mindset from the people in this room and policymakers and sort of employers, I think we can create an opportunity for a far broader range of people. So I'm excited. That's what we're going to see. Lou, last word to you.
I think the honest answer is it's in the hands of government and whoever is in government and the policymakers and, to your point, Ash, an industry. I think together they're going to be the biggest drivers of how we deal with the moment. Whatever happens, we're going to look back in 5-10 years and recognise this as a moment. So, I think we've got an opportunity to design it right and it works for everybody. To
Love that, design it right. Big round of applause for your panel. Thanks very much indeed. Cheers. Well, and I suppose if we've heard from the policy side, we also want to hear from the innovators. They're actually at the front line of this, actually sort of making that change happen. It's a great pleasure to introduce, therefore, our fireside chat, the power of AI. As developments in AI speed up, how will people and jobs be impacted? To take us through that, great pleasure to introduce Saul Klein, who's the co-founder of Academy, non-executive director at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology in April 2023. Saul is also co-founder and managing partner of Phoenix Corp, home to Local Globe, Latitude Solar and Basecamp Venture Capital Funds. He's going to be talking with Dorothy Chou, who's the head of public affairs at Google DeepMind, which is just come together, actually bringing a number of parts of the Google empire together to provide cutting-edge AI capabilities with a company of scientists, engineers, and researchers. They're going to be telling us a little bit about what happens next. Thanks very much.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Phoenix Court. So you're going to hear in the next 15 minutes from one of our neighbours. And I know Lucy talked about one of her neighbours being here. One of our neighbours here at Phoenix Court is DeepMind. We're very fortunate to be in a neighbourhood where the world's best AI company lives. I say the world's best AI company because very recently Google or Alphabet decided that the work that DeepMind does is so important that they created their global center of expertise around all things AI in our neighborhood.
Yes.
And combined Google's AI with DeepMind, and the CEO and founder of DeepMind, Demis, now runs both. Now, one of the reasons I think this is incredibly significant, having spent some time in the 90s working in Redmond at Microsoft, which is, you know, another AI company, the idea that something that was as important from a technology standpoint was going to be run outside of the global HQ was basically impossible, like would never happen. So I think, you know, what I'd love to just explore a little bit with you, Dorothy, you know, maybe tell us a little bit about your role, but also, you know, what you see as the significance of, you know, one of the 5 most important companies in the world taking what currently is the most important technology in the world and saying, you know, London,
Yep.
King's Cross, or, you know, as I would call it, the new square mile, is the place to think about this. You know, what is it that makes this place the best place? Because I know you've spent some of your career in Silicon Valley to be thinking about the issues that we're talking about today.
Well, thanks, Saul, for having me. For those who aren't familiar, DeepMind is a company that's building safe AI systems, advanced AI systems, to solve some of the world's most pressing challenges, like health, climate change, and beyond. And we were actually located just down the road, as you were mentioning. We were founded in 2010, acquired by Alphabet in 2014. And as Saul just mentioned, we have now combined the teams with the center of AI for Alphabet being in London, which is pretty amazing. And for me, like Saul was saying, I spent nearly a decade in Silicon Valley at a number of different technology companies. And the biggest change that I've noticed is the ability to move outside the sector and better understand how the technology is impacting people on the ground. When you're in London, you have different cultural institutions, a predisposition towards the humanities that I think is quite different, and offering that natural multidisciplinary approach to a lot of the problems that are in technology. And it becomes really possible to separate the work that you're doing in tech from how it affects people. And so we've partnered with Central St. Martin's, also in our neighborhood, another neighbor, to work with students actually and help them think through how they want to see AI come into the world. And when we gave them an open brief about, well, what are the ways that you think technology should be used, 8 out of the 10 projects in the first year that we did this pilot turned out to be about climate and sustainability. So I thought it was really interesting to see what the next generation wants this technology doing, and enabling them to have a voice and a say in how they want these technologies to be built and developed and deployed for their own benefit.
So I think this focus on people-centered technology or human-centered technology, or, you know, Lucy talked about purpose and values.
Yes.
You know, I know it's sort of core to the DNA of DeepMind.
Yes.
But, you know, Silicon Valley can sometimes have the reputation of move fast and break things, you know, kill or get killed. You know, how do you think about reconciling, you know, the mentality that you just described, which, as you said, this environment from a policy, from a humanities perspective, is sort of supportive and nurturing towards, with, you know, the power of the technology? I mean, what do you see as the opportunities that this technology has that really benefits society at large, as opposed to, you know, making some investors or founders wealthy?
I mean, it starts with public engagement, and I think that's something that tech companies have traditionally really struggled with and struggled to do well. And so I think there needs to be a lot of thinking through, how do you partner with civil society institutions? We've partnered, for example, with the Royal Society of Arts, with education policy experts, teachers, gathering them together to understand how lifelong learning needs to integrate AI and also encourage AI literacy. We've also worked with in the US, the American Association of People with Disabilities, bringing these historically excluded groups into the conversation on how AI should be developed and deployed. I think it's really hard to build these new types of multi-stakeholder form institutions, especially at a time when a lot of the institutions we've traditionally relied on for these types of public engagement conversations, like the media or trades unions, it's unclear where they sit, but I actually think what we need to be doing is putting them at the forefront, putting these workers and their well-being at the forefront to understand how AI is going to be impacting their day-to-day work, encouraging them to run through some pilot scenario exercises around demystifying the technology so that we can figure out how they think it's going to integrate into their lives. And then tech companies can work with them together on that. Like I said, it's something we've really struggled with, having worked at places like Uber where technology is extremely disruptive. I've had a front row seat in that conversation. And so how do you figure out with government what policies are the ones that will encourage equitable benefit, for example? How do you work with these groups to make sure that they are the ones advocating for what they need versus technology companies assuming they know? That's something that we're really, really dedicated to at DeepMind.
So, I mean, the space that we're in actually is our landlord's Camden Council. This space, and I think someone's put up at the back there, the reminder of it, was GMB space. This was the space for many of Camden's trade unions. And this is an area where, trade unions and trade union representation has always been sort of, Somerstown, it's very much part of our neighborhood.
Sure.
In the same way that DeepMind now is. So, I mean, I think there are lots of interesting opportunities if one is open to engaging. How do you think workers should be thinking about AI, and how do you think employers should be thinking about AI?
Funny enough, I want to dispel the notion that workers can't integrate with AI. I think chatbots are really only one dimension of what AI looks like when it's integrated. It's the popular one. It's the way it's manifesting now. But that doesn't mean that AI can't be assistive in some workflows. One of the companies I've been lucky enough to be an angel investor in is called Art. And what they do is enable artists and creatives to basically put all of their different designs into a custom algorithm. And so if you're a fashion designer, for example, you put all your designs into the algorithm, and it spits out for you if you say, this season I want broad shoulders, I want this color. It'll spit out all the variations for you based on your previous designs. And then you can go through and actually change them and customize them however you want. And you can find it assistive to your whole creative process. And I think that's how we want to see AI integrated. That's a more passive integration. But I also think chatbots can, in some cases, be useful. Like my mother actually is the power user in my family, and she's not a native speaker of English, so she actually finds it extremely useful just to write her emails, the first drafts, and she tells me that if it wasn't for ChatGPT, her emails would be much more blunt, is the way she puts it. So I do think that there's a number of different skills, and what she's gotten really good at is prompt engineering, much better than me. And I work in the industry. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can see that happen, but literacy is really the key. And so partnering with different institutions on figuring out how to bring that literacy into the work environment is going to be really key to unlocking all these benefits.
Great. So just one final question. AI safety is a big topic.
Yes.
And you guys have talked about this. The UK government has talked about this. Just from a policy perspective, safety is an example. Obviously, sort of fair, transparent AI, which is going to work across all sectors of the economy, is important as well. When you think about regulation and governance, and again, going back to that first question of being in this neighborhood versus being in the Bay Area or versus being in Brussels, what are the opportunities that you see for constructive AI regulation in this geography as opposed to others?
Well, I think we're so lucky to be in the UK where the approach has been extremely thoughtful around needing to take in the context in which AI is used to be able to regulate it well. And thinking through the approaches to more powerful technologies as well. What are the ways that we need to ensure the technology is tested, well evaluated for the way it was intended to be used? Is it effective? What are the questions around bias? And so I think what we have the opportunity to do here is build the infrastructure that we want to see in order to get to the future benefits that government believes we can unlock. I think what we see in a lot of other jurisdictions is a lot of nostalgia in politics, a lot of how do we go backwards to a different time, maybe that was better. But I'm excited to see, I think in the UK, what they're trying to put together is what is the future vision of society that we want to see? And how do we partner with companies and civil society and academia to build towards that future? And I think there's a really great opportunity for the UK to lead, especially when it comes to conversations around global governance. That's what we see the summit coming together, as well as a lot of the responses to the existing UK white paper, which we're hugely supportive of.
So just one final or couple of key thoughts or takeaways for the audience. So a lot of people in the audience are, responsible for hiring at organizations, yes, for building sort of a skilled workforce. You've talked about literacy. What are 2 or 3 things you think people should go away and think about doing this afternoon, when it comes to, taking full opportunity of the fact that AI is, potentially an incredibly positive force across society and the economy. We're in an environment where, it's values driven, where we have policymakers, sounds like hearing from Lucy today, on both sides of the aisle, who are aligned on a kind of a sort of a social compact, yes, around safe, responsible AI. How should people should feel good about all of that, but what should they do starting this afternoon?
Well, I think there's a couple things. The first is, I think, as you build AI, really figure out how to center the communities that you're building for and think about the impacts. And knowing that no single piece of software is perfect, we know that there are bugs. So how do you manage those bugs and enable communities to report that to you? What is the system that you're going to build so that there is a way to get redress? I think that's incredibly important, and get feedback. So red teaming, those types of practices and testing before deploying is incredibly important. The second piece is actually around data preparedness. A lot of the instances of AI that we find that are either incomplete or not working is because the data isn't ready to be taken into or formatted in a way that can be used with AI. And so those are the two, and I actually think we can partner with government on that as well. A lot of the public sector data that can be hugely helpful for things around climate, around health. If we can format that in ways that enable AI uptake more quickly, those things, things combined, I think can be hugely transformative.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much. As I said at the beginning, I think, we're very lucky to have the world's best AI company in our neighborhood. And I think, the fact that you guys are very focused on the equitable application of AI in a neighborhood where, equality is, is not, there is stark inequality still, yes, in this neighborhood. Means that there's a lot of opportunity but a lot of work to do. So thanks very much, and hopefully people have in this short segment got a few takeaways and have a sense of what's going on in the UK and with DeepMind. So thanks, Dorothy.
Thanks, Saul.
Great. So we're going to move straight on to our next panel. We've got a great panel coming up. If I think people are just going to get mic'd up. Hopefully, that gave people sort of a sense of, both some of the policy thinking and the policy environment, but also, what an incredible opportunity we have here in the UK to sort of demonstrate not just the possibilities of AI and the technology, but actually also think about it in a kind of a positive and an equitable way. So, the next panel, when they're ready, we're going to kind of cover a few different viewpoints. We're going to hear from employers, we're going to hear from social enterprises, we're going to hear from companies that sort of are in the sector in terms of helping talent find the right roles, but also use AI to do that. So, if the panel is ready, if they can come up, that's great. Anywhere you guys want to go, I'll try follow along. So we have Sultan, who's the co-founder and president of Beamery. Full disclosure, we are small shareholders and very happy. We have Paula, who's the CTO, CIO of Aldermore, one of the UK's, I guess, sort of challenger banks from the SME marketplace. We have Ezeki Britton, who is now at the Center for Finance, Innovation and Technology, and we've got Dr. Claire Thorne, who's the co-CEO of Tech She Can. So I'm going to just ask everyone to give a brief introduction to themselves and what they do, but what the panel is about, and I might be departing from the rules here. If people want, we can also ask questions, because I'm kind of aware that we've sort of been talking at everyone. But the panel is really here to discuss how do you ensure inclusivity in this sort of AI-enabled world now. I think, you heard from Ash earlier on about his personal journey, about what the Academy is trying to do to sort of unlock potential, and take people into, from all backgrounds, interesting and high-paying, highly skilled roles. As I said, this looks like we're in, the near future, this space. We've got the Crick, we've got DeepMind, etc. But literally just across the road over there, 7 out of 10 kids are on social care, 5 out of 10 kids are on free school meals, and an adult male lives 10 years less than in Highgate, which is not just shocking, it's unacceptable in a G6 economy. So given that we've got all of these opportunities with AI, we've got great policy environments, we've got great AI companies, maybe as you guys just also briefly introduce yourselves, you can just share one thought in terms of sort of how you think about a more inclusive society when it comes to sort of AI. So why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Saul. As Saul said, I'm Sultan, I run Beamery, and actually a lot of the discussion here today is directly aligned with why we started the company about 10 years ago. At the front of the room, we have the sign from Academy and Ash, Make Potential Count. We started the company to create technologies that allowed companies to hire full potential and develop full potential. And one of the challenges we saw is that it's very difficult to create systemic change without looking at some of the barriers to what is stopping us currently from hiring full potential and developing full potential, including actually identifying people's skills. We spent a lot of time today talking about skills, but if you ask anybody in this room, hey, what are your skills? It's quite a difficult question to answer. And one of the things we have found is that there are ways to use AI and technologies to help address that, both at the level of how people look at designing jobs and how people look at identifying skills within their workforce, their employees, and making more inclusive decisions. And I think, within the context of how we look at the societal impact of moving away from credentials, moving away from relying on degrees, we also have to recognize, why have we relied on credentials? And it's because it's difficult to do the alternative, and we need to look at the underlying foundations, including the systems we use that help us get there. And I think the conversation today is so timely because we now can. A lot of these things are now possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul.
Good. All right. I'm Paula, so CTIO at Aldermore. We are a challenger bank, and our purpose is to try and serve people who are underserved and underwhelmed by the main street. And the question is, how do we do that, and how do we do that effectively? Probably not with a whole lot of clunky, painful manual processes. So there's huge opportunity in terms of how we streamline so that our people can spend their time where it really matters, helping and talking to customers. And so I see the opportunity in front of us to make sure we get rid of the kind of painful work and really create and focus on the time where that human contact hugely matters. We had a wonderful email from a customer last week who said ran a small leisure centre, it's a charity, really struggling in this climate, been dreading making that call and saying, I'm in trouble right now. And we had a person who could spend an hour on the phone with him, helping him and figuring out how we could do that. And so a lot of my mission is to try and bring the skills in to free up the people to do the stuff that really matters. Hugely, hugely supportive of being inclusive. I have a couple of personal stories that I might share. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, so very, very conscious that just because of the accident of the color of my skin, I had a whole bunch of opportunity that so many other people didn't. I feel a real obligation to try and kind of pay that back and make opportunities more open. But also, I flirted with computer science a lot through my career. So, people have often asked me, you've had decades always in financial services, very big investment banks to challenger banks and in technology. So kind of double whammy of not a lot of people look like me. How have you survived that environment? And I think back to my intro to computer science, which is when it was first introduced as a subject in school. I think it was 14. And I was good at math. I was in an all-girls school, and I did math, and it was fine at it. I was offered the opportunity to take computer science, but it involved being bused to the boys' school, because that's where it was offered. So nothing in my professional career has been as frightening as walking as a 14-year-old girl down the playground in the break at the boys' school to get to the lab. And I still remember that feeling of, I don't think I belong here. There's only 3 of us who look a bit like me. Can I do this? And think, come on, you've won this place and you've got to be able to do it. So I kind of hold that when I think about all of the people out there who bring that baggage and feel like they don't necessarily fit. How do we make it accessible and how do we open up skills? Which is why I'm so super passionate about Academy. And we're really spending our time opening up opportunities both to external and our internal employees. We know the jobs in our bank will change. So how do we start offering the training and the opportunity for people who maybe haven't had that opportunity and have the aptitude to reskill and engage and build? So I guess I'm an optimist there.
Thank you. Brilliant. Izzy?
Hi, everyone. So Azechi Britton, or Ez, as most people know me, I'm the CEO of CFIT, the UK Centre for Finance, Innovation and Technology. So we're a government-backed, Treasury-backed and City of London-backed organisation that focuses on removing the barriers to scaling for the UK finance and innovation sector. And we do that through our time-bound coalition model, bringing together the ecosystem to solve real problems. But in a former life, I was a VC at ImpactX Capital, venture capital fund focused on investing in diverse and underrepresented founders. I launched a social enterprise called Code Untapped, which is about bringing diverse technologists together with enterprise organizations through coding hackathons, workshops, and the rest. I launched a fintech startup, which was focused on providing better access to finance or fairer access to finance for UK employees. And prior to that, spent 10 years as a technologist in the banking sector. And I'm also a trustee for Crisis, one of the UK's largest homeless charities. So as you can tell, it's a very big focus on mission for me, particularly around social change, social drivers, and doing that through innovation, through technology. So AI is a critical piece of that, and as we look at finance innovation going forwards, particularly with our first coalition, which will be around open finance, we can see that this is a conversation that's starting to crop up more and more and more. And my particular bugbear or interest in that is around the data and the biases inherent to that data, and what outcomes does that mean if we're then building systems, making decisions off the back of that.
Great, thank you. Claire?
I feel like job's done. You've covered it all. So Claire Thorne, co-CEO, it's a job share, you don't often see it, for a charity called Tech She Can that essentially spun out of PwC. We were on a mission to increase the number of all children, but especially girls, and then ultimately women, choosing tech careers as their first choice. I'm also a venture partner at an organisation called Deep Science Ventures, where we build science companies in-house from scratch, and they're doing really great stuff in terms of their gender diversity across their founding teams as well. I'm a physicist formerly. We'll talk about former lives. I'm a physicist formerly, so totally identify with that sense of belonging or not belonging, what you mentioned, Paula. Often the only person, the only girl in the room, and then the only woman in the room. And what we do at Tech She Can is we don't teach coding or a practical skill, but we've reached 50,000 children so far in the first 18 months, and what we do is we inspire them to think about careers and routes and choices that they would never even have access to. So, Saul, you mentioned people in the local community and the socio-economic demographic. We work regionally and nationally, and everything we do for schools is completely free. We have a stability focus. And there are some children that we work with, and they're going into secondary school, and they live a mile or two out of, say, Coventry City Centre, and they've never been into the city centre. And then you're expecting them in 3, 4, 5 years' time to access the same work experience opportunities, to be digitally engaged, to participate at like a foundation level, let alone to understand what AI might mean for them in the future of work. So that's our mission, and that's what we're up to. So I guess I care about science and technology talent and opportunities for everybody.
Brilliant. So you can see there's a really amazing panel here, and we're obviously in the time that we've got not going to be able to get all of the insights that we'd want. So I think, I'm sure we can chat afterwards. But I just wanted to pick up on the topic of bias, because, obviously bias, when it is encoded literally into software data, cannot just be dangerous, it can be incredibly dangerous. In fact, you can weaponize bias. Obviously we've seen this with misinformation. And it's probably one of the scariest near-term aspects of AI. When we think about unintended bias, because there is intended bias, and systems can be designed to magnify the intention of bias. But if you think about building systems, that mitigate against bias, and this is obviously critical in a work setting when, I think everyone has said in different ways, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So how do you start to build systems from a hiring perspective, from an educational perspective, that sort of, take bias out of the system, or at least recognize bias and sort of leverage it in a way that is, not damaging? And I know this is something that, Beamery has done a lot of work in thinking about. So do you want to just maybe talk a bit about how you've thought about it?
Sure, and I think there's a lot to say on this topic, but to zoom in on two buckets. The first is recognizing that the majority of the decisions that technology is helping us make, if we weren't using the technology, there would still be bias. If you look at the question of hiring or employment decisions, if you didn't have any technologies, there's a lot of bias inherent in, what can be called like tap on the shoulder decisions, or who do you know? And one of the questions is the introduction of technology helping reduce that or change that, and how do you compare those two? And a key thing that technology, even before you get to AI or other components, can help with is actually transparency of choice compared to non-technology based decisions. And then you have to zoom in on, well, what are you providing transparency into? And in the case of a lot of employment decisions, the question isn't just tracing what happened, did we hire in an inclusive way? The question is also zooming in on the sort of lead indicators of what could help us reduce bias. And skills is a great example. If we look at the way people either design job descriptions or identify talent, you very rarely have access to everyone. It's one of the things that the academy team does, opens up a pool of the types of people you can access, looking at people without degrees. But there's also challenges with having the confidence that if you take risks by not hiring for credentials, that you then would know how to train those people. And again, the things that you can bake into the way that the technology is structured is creating not only the transparency of how those choices of what you do can reduce bias, but actually the cascade of assisted decisions that can take you from something that can allow you to hire for potential to actually being able to then develop for that potential. And I think being able to see how that connected set of technologies can give you confidence to make more inclusive hiring practices and decisions is a very good example.
Great. So just in terms of opening access, you know, I too grew up in apartheid South Africa, although, you know, I was fortunate enough, my dad's over there, that my mum and dad took me out of the country when I was 6. So, you know, I had the opportunity to grow up in theoretically a more inclusive society. But, you know, you're shaking your head, and I agree with you. You know, how do we, having seen what a, you know, a systemically unequal society looks like, where it is regulated in the law, apartheid South Africa, and now, you know, being part of an organization that is looking to give access and opportunity to sort of a diverse workforce, but still we're confronted by real inequality, you know, even in a society like this. How do you think about opening access and sort of reducing bias from an access perspective? I mean, when we
it's the
start,
million dollar question, right? But it's absolutely critical. And sometimes legislated bias is almost easier to deal with than the insidious, invisible bias. I put that out there. But I think it is those access routes, assumptions, and I'm a big believer in data. So one of the things we're doing at Aldermore is collecting people's socioeconomic background data. That requires a leap of faith for people to trust and actually allow us to capture the data, but it allows us to measure. And so we're talking to people and saying, we want to understand what the pipelines are. It's relatively easy to do gender. It's a lot harder to do socioeconomics. So if you will trust us and give that data anonymized, we will track progression and challenge ourselves on how people actually are promoted. You know, it's what are all the different routes we can use, whether it's the academy, whether it's 10,000 black interns, whether it's female mentoring programs, apprenticeship routes rather than just the sort of standard Oxbridge, and I did get Oxford in my degree, but you know, different entry routes, I think absolutely critical. But then how do you support those people? Because I've certainly had experiences in the past where we've opened the door and then gone, oh no, that hasn't worked out. So you're right, that piece of actual training, support, awareness, and kind of being curious. Who's coming in? Why are they coming in? What's the data? Where are the patterns? Why is this different? I think that mindset, rather than just other, is the thing that will help us really kind of challenge ourselves on how people come through.
and it's just because you're now working in the city, you know, not famous for its sort of openness and diversity. Maybe I just got the wrong impression.
It's true.
But you know, how do you think about, you know, as the CEO of an organization that brings together stakeholders from the city and from the financial services sector, how do you talk to your stakeholders about these challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. And one thing I'm very proud of is being a mixed race, half English, half Nigerian man as the first CEO of an organization like CFIT that's never existed, that is literally backed by £5 million of Treasury funding and £500,000 of City London funding, and came out of the Khalifa Review, which was written by a non-English man, or as a non-white man as well, Sir Ron Khalifa. And in fact, my chair is Charlotte Croswell, who's obviously a very successful and incredible woman. So I think one of the things you have to do is lead with your chest, right? And one of the things that I ensure is that CFIT as an organization is representative of those same beliefs in being diverse and having a wide group of individuals. And in fact, one of the things we ensure is that we are UK-wide. Even though we're backed by the City of London, we're a UK-wide virtual organization. My next 3 hires have actually been a woman from Wales, a woman from Scotland, and a black man in London. So if you look at the team, actually, we're very underweight on white men, actually. We keep joking, we will hire one eventually, but you know, that's the way it is. But that's been predominantly because we focused on what people have achieved. What have they done? And I make a big point about this. When I look at people's CVs, when I've interviewed for the most recent roles, I've not looked at one person's educational background. I have no idea what degrees they did. If they had degrees, or what their qualifications were. Does not interest me unless it's a professional qualification that you literally must have to do the job. Beyond that, I don't care. I'm only interested in what can you actually do, right? And I think if you can start to bring that focus to things, if you can look at the attitude and aptitude of people as opposed to, have you got these skills? Tick. Did you go to this school? Tick. Did you do this? Tick. You start to get into a much, much stronger place. And by presenting in that way and working with literally key stakeholders from across the country, my team now are working with Barclays, Santander, HSBC, Experian, Equifax, Funding Circles, OPA, Revolut, the FCA, HMRC, HMT. You know, name a department, name a financial organization, we're probably working with them, right? And that is all being led by an incredibly diverse group of individuals who are running at a pace and doing something the country's never quite seen before. So if you can lead in that way, you start to create change in people's minds, and that's the first place you have to begin.
So, by virtue of being in this room or being on the panel, I think, you know, people have already self-identified as thought leaders. I mean, fantastic. We've got a real problem in this country that the FTSE 100, and I think, you know, Claire, I know you work with some FTSE 100 companies, you know, are not necessarily leveraging, and I'm being diplomatic here, which I'm not really known for, you know, the power of AI, the power of data, the power of diversity, the power of human capital in one of the world's, you know, most developed economies. What is it that you see in talking to people who are not in this room? And I think we probably do have some people from the FTSE 100 in this room. So if I'm being rude, I apologize. You can come talk to me afterwards. But as I said, I think anyone here is already leaning in. But there's 80–90% of the real economy in this country that is not leaning in. So how do we, if everything that we've heard this morning is true, which hopefully it is, you know, how do we change some of that?
Sure. So at TechSheCan it's a membership model, so we're fully funded and backed by industry. We have 250 members across 40 sectors, so it's not just a tech sector issue. They include Google, NatWest, Credit Suisse, HSBC, Barclays, etc. that you mentioned, plus some public sector organisations. And we don't need to sell to them our mission. They totally get it. They get that, you know, they can't attract the tech talent that they need. Whether it's diverse or not, they just can't attract the tech talent in the numbers they need, and Ash spoke to that. So they're really invested in that long-term pipeline, and we start working really young to change perceptions and make role models and pathways really visible. So we start from age 5. We don't need to sell it to our members. They get that, and they're not even necessarily going to go into those organisations, but they're just going to benefit everybody. I think on the points around bias as well, if I can come back on that bit, I feel like we should all be really alarmed, and I feel like there's not a sufficient level of alarm in the room and in society at the moment. And there's, you know, 10% of leaders in tech are women. Only 3% say that a career in tech is their first choice. And then we're talking about wholesale change, redesigning of the workplace, the economy, society, by a relatively small number of organisations, relatively small number of people. So there's huge things that I think need to change to make those pathways more inclusive. So we do that through role models, through changing perceptions. We work with children, we deliver lessons and careers inspiration, we put role models, people like yourself, into the classroom. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing something at an individual level. It's all free, and we're here to do that with you. And we put them into the classroom, and then you hear for yourself those perceptions and what really needs to change. And, you know, by the time girls particularly get to, say, 13 and they're about to take their GCSE options, it's too late. We've lost so many of them to STEM, and we're talking about diversifying the workforce for AI, you know, it's game over. So we start much younger. There was an 8-year-old we worked with, and worked with their class, and we said to them at the start of the class, draw somebody who you think looks like a worker in tech. And they all go off and they draw who they think looks like a worker in tech. And almost by osmosis and by the media, there's some really great reports from the Leverhulme Centre at Cambridge and that on this, what AI professionals look like in the media, etc. They draw who they think is a tech worker. It's a white, middle-aged man, all in their words, overweight, antisocial, totally words, in the basement, multiple screens, hacking into the Pentagon. And it's like, it's there, it's already there. So that sense of belonging, this is a career for me, even if they don't even know what the job title is or how to get into it, whether it's an apprenticeship or a university route, we've already lost them. 2 lessons later, they draw themselves. And they have a cape, they have their natural hair, but they say, they've identified that their passion, we talk about skills, we don't often talk about passions, and they've identified that their passion is languages, and actually languages and all non-STEM subjects can take you into a tech role. But they say to our team at the end, but Miss, how was I ever supposed to know this was an option? So there's real issues around representation. Language as well, I think, really matters. And you can't help but see and read stuff about godfathers of AI at the moment. And I just always ask, well, where are the godmothers? And it's either they're silenced, there's not enough of them, or they're not there in the first place. And we know they are there.
Yeah.
So who's getting the voice?
Ada Lovelace, not far away.
She's dead.
Okay, but I think what I want to just sort of leave people with here is, firstly, I think we've got great people here who are passionate, who are making a difference from school all the way up into the workforce and in the city. Thank you for that. We've got people in the room here who are making, just by being here, are trying to make a difference on this topic. And hopefully, what people have seen and heard today is that we've got all of the ingredients in this country to make a success of this. And I guess what I would just sort of encourage people to do is, if you do feel like you're hitting a brick wall on any of these topics, recognize that this is a full room and there are other people outside of this room who, care about this, know about this, and are trying to make a difference. And I think, if I'm being an optimist, and I am an optimist, maybe I said I was a realist, I'm actually an optimist, is that, this really changes when it's not just about tech anymore, but when people realize that this is just about what a future society looks like, and that there's room in this for everyone. So I just want to say thanks to the panel, thanks everyone for being here, and I'm going to hand back to our MC.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, guys. Right, well, that's almost it. Thank you, Saul. Thank you to our panel there. So I've been listening. I've been sort of sat by the buffet, and I've been thinking about what's the question I want to sum up with. And I suppose being sat by the buffet gave me a food thought, which was, can you have your cake and eat it? Because I think that has been the discussion this morning about actually, can we really have it all? With this great, sudden, big change in the technological wheel, where does it actually take it? And Lucy started us off with this question, the big question, who benefits from the disruption that AI brings? The panel that I chaired, the conclusion to that question was, well, actually, quite a lot of people could really benefit. And Ash talked about his own journey into tech and the leveling of the playing fields. But then we also, I think through Saul's sessions, heard about, the barriers that would still be there, the inequalities might still be there, the fact of where we are, the story of where we are, the story of inequality right on our doorstep. And of course, he raised that great Zuckerberg quote of the ages to move fast and break things. And it got me thinking, actually, maybe the story of our era is whether AI can help us move fast and fix things. Because that is really what we want to see from this in terms of if it's going to be worth the disruption, worth the change, it's got to be additive, it's got to be improving. And I was thinking, well, actually, what might be the sorts of things that we'd want to hear? And I think the last session actually was very sort of, I think, sort of instructive in that. And I took out of that, be humble, be human, be helpful. Those might be things that we want to take out of the future of AI. Of course, Dorothy said, well, in doing that, we need to build the infrastructure we want to see. And that got me thinking about the great Peter Parker quote, with great power comes great responsibility, right? You know, you've watched it as well. But there is that kind of thing about, well, actually, if we want to distribute opportunity to talent everywhere, we've got to actually distribute opportunity. And that's not just a tech play, that's a whole wider societal play. And then we sort of conclude where we start, right? You know, the UK has put its sort of flag in the ground, serious about the opportunities of AI and being a world leader in that. And of course, I'd go back to what Lucy said at the beginning, which is that you can't just talk big, you need to act big. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you have your cake and eat it. Please enjoy the buffet. Thank you very much.